Things first, I was handed this announcement asking me to please tell the VBS crew leaders that there is an information packet for you at the VBS table, which is in like the spooky green hallway, I think. No, wait, it'll be in the foyer. Right, good. That hallway's creepy. And to please be at the church by 5:40, if possible. Thank you. That's the announcement. I wanted to do that first because if you know me at all, I'm incredibly scatterbrained. Like, here's the level of scatterbrained that I am. I was getting ready for Deeper Weekend, making one of those weird purchases where you have to go and ask a human being in a store, like, do you have 20 pool noodles and some paint and maybe a watermelon? And they have to think you're crazy as you walk out the door. I'm going and I'm making all of this stuff, and I'm walking to my car, which I had locked because it had very valuable stuff that now belonged to the church in it. And as I'm walking to my car, I remember, hey, my car is locked. And so like as I'm walking, I get my key and I have it out by the time I got to the door. Because 9 times out of 10, I'm the idiot who like walks up with pull stuff and just jerks on the car door. And I was proud of myself for doing that. Like, that's stuff that normal people do all of the time. And I'm so unaware of all of those types of things, right? One of those things that I may not be aware of all the time is where I'm coming from trying to finish like my degree in theology and things like that. All that to say, last week I'm sitting out here signing kids up for Deeper Weekend, and someone just had some feedback for me on some sermons they had heard, and they said, hey, halfway through, we're with you. And then you take a left turn into what they called Smartsville, into what I'll call just theological languageville that I've had to learn to survive, and you're no longer aware of that. And so if I take that turn today, which I don't think I will. But if at any point I take a turn and you're not with me, please don't be afraid. Just be like, hey, like just 1 second. We can talk. We can do that. I'm on your side. Anyway, I'm very unaware, right? But even I could not be unaware of the very weird paradox of this Friday. This Friday, I was in my car driving to Nashville to pick up one of the coolest things I've ever seen, this bubble soccer set that we played with at Deeper Weekend. And if you haven't seen it, or if you like walked through the foyer sometime this weekend and saw like these massive bubbles, it's all good. Like, we just put teenagers inside them and then tell them to hit each other and play soccer if the ball should happen to come to you in your like death arena battle in safe bubbles. And that's like, so it's great. It's like this fun game where you're like running around, you're doing stuff. And I was driving 3 hours out of my way, round trip, to get these things. Because, youth ministry is so great, and our ministry is going to change the world, and ministry is what we're all about, right? But I couldn't miss the weird juxtaposition of, on one hand, I'm driving to get bubble soccer. It's going to be a great game, and kids are going to love it, and it's just going to be a great ministry day. But the whole way there and the whole way back, as I'm listening to NPR, all they're talking about is 300 people killed in this Malaysian plane that was shot down over Ukraine, and it looks like these rebels did it, and it's going to put international pressure on Putin, but we don't know like what's going to happen. And, well, we're going to listen to what the president has to say, and 300 people died, right? And then if they took a break from that, it was the ground invasion kind of sweep of Gaza has begun by Israel, and people debating, well, no, like Hamas is firing and Israel's firing, and people are going to, this many is killed already. And so here I am, supposedly a minister of this gospel who will save the world, going to get bubble soccer as people 10 times the numbers of our event or whatever are being killed. And in some moment of honesty, like where I can just, these people that I can text and be weird or just, I don't know, talk out loud to all my partners in ministry. Just the thought I had was, like it's on days like today where my day consists of bubble soccer and people are talking about civilian planes shot down and ground wars that you really have to decide that if your ministry is something beautiful or if we may be tragically misguided. I'll defend this weekend, and I'll defend bubble soccer. I've come to terms with that, and I think it's a great thing. And what else was I supposed to do? But this weekend we went deeper than bubble soccer, talking about living intentionally, from the stuff that we put into our bodies and the way we eat to what we do with our bodies, whether that's working out or whether that's living in service to other people, right? Where our food comes from, what we do when we go out, all of that stuff. Right? And these are questions that are good for God, because we had to ask ourselves a question. We asked this question, right? What do you want to be when you grow up? And you can't say a profession. We get good answers, you know. Like, I want to be happy. I want to be satisfied. I want to be a father, a mother. We want to be these things. And that's kind of a profound statement, right? Because there's this quote from John Lennon, like when he was like small, apparently a teacher asked him, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said, happy. And they said, I didn't understand the assignment. And I said, they didn't understand life. And that's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool quote, right? But we can't stop there, I'm afraid, or we'll be happy, but we won't be Christian, right? Because the one thing we're totally assured of beyond this, that Christ is the hope for the world and that we are saved by faith, is that creation hurts. Is that things are not totally okay, that there's death and there's war and there's like issues all over about clean water and food and people that don't have necessary things, and there's unrest, right? These kinds of things. And so if life is a gift and we're supposed to live into that gift, we have a question to ask. What do we do with it? We don't hear it much anymore, but the phrase, it used to be when you would get a gift, you would have this phrase, and you would say, much obliged, right? Much obliged. Obligated. So it's in this context between paint war shirts and bubble soccer and dead people shot out of the sky, not to be morbid, that we enter into the word today in Romans 8, starting at verse 12. Would you stand for the reading of the word, if able? Paul says this, therefore, brothers and sisters, we have an obligation, but it is not to the sinful nature to live according to it. For if you live according to the sinful nature, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the misdeeds of the body, you will live. For those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God. The Spirit you received does not make you slaves so that you live in fear again. Rather, the Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship, and by Him we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit Himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. Now, if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ. If indeed we share in His sufferings, in order that we may also share in His glory. I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. The creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. Not only so, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. But hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what they already have? But if we hope for what we do not yet have, we wait for it patiently. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. It's not waiting for the children of God to come along and be right about everything while the world goes to heck in a handbasket around us. It is creation out there is not waiting for us to grow up and be happy and satisfied in the hopes that someone might peek in the door one day and say, hey, they have good life, let's join in. Creation is not waiting just so we can have our opinions and we can pray to our God by ourselves what may happen in these big scary parts of the world where violence is. While people like me can hide behind our armed forces and look at how great the world is over here. It's good. Creation waits eagerly for the children of God to be revealed. Why? Because the children of God are called to follow Christ. And where Christ went was the very center of suffering in the world. To a hurt people, in the middle of military occupation by cruel people who had subjected the people of God to pain and suffering. And even after Christ came and died and rose again and left, the church was good. All the church wanted to do, like we kind of wanted to die, right? Because if we die, we go to Christ, and if we stay here, but life is good now. Christ has freed us from bondage of sin, and things are great. And so we would sing songs, and we ate together communion. And then time kind of went on, and then people started dying. And people started getting killed, and suddenly, like, the Jewish, our families who didn't join the church started to not like the church so much. And suddenly these people of victory and freedom were on one side hit by Rome, who didn't like them very much, and on the other side hit from the people who were not taken in by this false Messiah of Christ, who did not like them at all. And this vision of maybe our purpose is not to be happy, to be satisfied, had to set in very, very quickly, right? We take on the real burden of others. And some people, like this, if you're sitting here and we're like, well, yeah, duh, like we go and serve. We do as Christ did. We're very good at talking about this here. One of our 3 grace symbols, the basin and towel, stands for our service to others. And that's great. But it bears repeating because I want to make sure we get it. Not to make fun of anybody, but one of my favorite new things on the internet is this kind of Christian blog that juxtaposes quotes from like wealthy American Christian leaders over images of like a broken world, like in third world countries. And so it'll be like, hey, don't let today define you. Tomorrow will be better. Dream beyond your circumstances. And then it's like people like eating through garbage, right? And it's funny in the way that you kind of, it's a nervous laugh because I think we've just been caught, right? Is we have this thing of, hey, just try harder and do better because we live in a world where it's kind of, success is here for us. And we don't really know what to do if our goal becomes to be satisfied and to have all of this gifts that Christ lays on us. We don't really know what to do if that falls apart. Or what we say to the person who's terminally ill. Or what to do with these situations of abject poverty so bad that maybe we start to wonder if Jesus Christ really can save them. And He totally can. 2 of the most powerful words in the Christian existence are me too, solidarity, standing with somebody, entering into their suffering, right? Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who I'll mention every time I get up here, has this great quote I've probably said before. We must learn to view people less in light of what they do and more in light of what they suffer. Because if I'm looking at me, if there is any hope for me at all, it is because Jesus Christ, the God of the universe, viewed me less in light of what I do and more in light of what I suffered and brought upon myself in sin. And that is the good news. To be a Christian means we don't believe that everyone gets what they deserve, right? That's a very, very cool thing, right? And so Dietrich Bonhoeffer, his story ends like this. He came over to America to go to all of the black churches around his time, like right before World War II, because he's like, oh, this is where, I mean, they really get it. Like, there's something here. Like, he was so attracted to their spirituality, and his best friends were there. But then Nazi Germany happened, and he decided he had to go back because he had grown up in the German church, and they had saved him, and now they needed him. And so he would go and he would play an active part in being against Hitler and resisting that to the point that he would be killed months before the war ended. Months. And we lost maybe our greatest mind of the 20th century because he knew that his calling was to enter into the suffering of his fellow man. Right? My namesake, St. Patrick, models this very well. If you don't know about St. Patrick, born and then captured into slavery by like Irish raiders, and he was taken to Ireland. He was not religious, right? His parents were, but he didn't have time for that. And then he goes into this slavery, and it's strange, like whether those crisis moments, like whether it's the fourth quarter of a football game or you've been sold into slavery, how quickly you turn to prayer as something to help you out, even if you're not that religious. And so he does, and he's just out in these fields. He has nothing else to do than think on these things and pray. And finally his chance arises, and he escapes, and he runs to the docks, and he gets back to his family. And he can have it all, right? He can be happy. He can be satisfied. He's back with his family. He's Christian now. He can follow this God. But he starts having these really pesky dreams in which his slavers and these people who had abused him are singing, "Come back to us, Patrick. Come back. We need the gospel," right? And so our culture drinks to St. Patrick once a year, and we think of the four-leaf clover and the Irish because he made Ireland his life, because he went back to Ireland for the sake of those who had enslaved him, entering into, giving up that stuff that he could have had. He could have been way more satisfied, way more comfortable if that pesky God's voice hadn't been in his head. Do as I have done, kind of thing, right? And these are all well and good, but I just want to remind us it doesn't have to be dramatic, this entering into suffering, if this is truly indeed what we are called to do, right? It can be the smallest thing, right? If you see Blake Eastep today, take a look at his elbows, because he had a long football tournament, and as they're driving away, one of his teammates was dumb enough to throw some trash out the bus. So you can bet the whole team was crawling on the ground, so much so that their entire elbows were skinned. And no, Blake did not have a choice. But man, that's a statement that we are a team, and we are in this together. And I think if we entered into the suffering, I think we'd all at least have like some skinned elbows, right? If not a whole lot worse. And so maybe like there are these farmers that I know in South Carolina. I call them farmers. At one point, they're just people who are interested in food, right? And somehow they come into the knowledge of the school system that there are kids who the school system knows that when they send them home on Friday, if they don't send any food home with them, they won't eat until Monday morning. And not only do they have anything to eat, but they probably don't have anywhere to live. They may be in a hotel or in a car. Right? And so these people will be like, okay, so what can we do for them? And they're like, well, if you want to go, you want to be legit, like we have a lot of paper for you to fill out, and you need a commercial kitchen and this thing to be able to give these kids food. And these people said, okay, that sounds great. And then they went and found out where these kids lived. They found their cars and their hotel rooms. And then they became farmers and brought good food to them, entering into the suffering of others. And it took a lot of work, and it took a lot of sacrifice, but that's what they did. Right? Maybe you don't have the land to start a farm. Maybe you're not on a team, you're going to get punished when anyone does something wrong. If you ever want to be involved in youth ministry, we kind of take a class that's, I think we call it chariot rides, like, come into my chariot, see what I do. It's from the Bible. And we use, in the youth curriculum, we always watch this one scene from this movie, Little Miss Sunshine. And in this movie, not to give it away, but there's this older, angsty brother, Dwayne, right, who hates his family so much he's taken a vow of silence. And the only thing getting him through the day is the knowledge that one day he will leave the house and he will go learn to fly jets. And that's what he wants to do. It's what he's always wanted to do. And so they're driving down the road. His sister's like quizzing him on all of these symbols, and he's pointing the way to turn and all of this stuff. And then she gets to the colorblind test. And it turns out he's colorblind. I just gave it away. But it turns out Dwayne's colorblind. And the uncle, seeing what's happening, is like, Dwayne, you can't fly jets if you're colorblind. And Dwayne like just freaks out into this rage and goes crazy to the point where they have to stop the van. And Dwayne like gets out and goes into a field and just yells cuss words. He's just unbridled suffering, like his whole life's purpose has been demolished. And mom, God bless her. God bless you, mothers of teenagers. This mom, she knows what Dwayne needs to do. She knows what's best for him. She knows that he's hurting everyone around him by getting off this van so they're going to be late to the place they're trying to go. And so she says all the right stuff like, Dwayne, I'm sorry. Okay, I understand that you're hurting right now, but you got to get on the bus. You got to get back on the bus. Like, let's not be stupid. Come on, like, you got to get on the bus. And she can't get him to do what she wants him to do. And then his little sister just goes down into the field with Dwayne. Right? And she goes to him, and she doesn't say a word. I mean, she just puts her arm around him and like leans on his shoulder. And after a few minutes, Dwayne says, okay, let's go. And he walks back up this hill. He says to his family, I'm sorry for that stuff I said. I didn't mean it. I was upset. This redemptive moment for Dwayne. And so maybe for you, entering into the suffering of others, maybe it means something drastic. Maybe it means that on a day like today, you may end up in Ecuador on a mission trip. Maybe it means that it will impact the very job that you do, and you'll end up still being a fisherman, but kind of a fishers of men thing. Or maybe it means you know people who need you not to tell them what they need to do and get back on the bus. Maybe they need someone who will walk down the hill into the wilderness with them and just be there and enter into that suffering and hurt for them and be in solidarity, right? This is what we're called to do. Not because we like it. No. Suffering is the enemy we engage. It's not a contest. Let's see who can suffer more. Anything like that. We just long for the day that there's not going to be any suffering. And it's not here yet. And Jesus came, and in our scripture we have these beautiful passages written by John about the day that there's going to be no more sorrow, no more tears, and heaven will come down to earth. But in the midst of when we're casting those visions, Jesus Christ knows that day is not here yet. And so he dies in the hope that his death will mean something to those who are killing him, in the hope that his life given out for us will mean something that in the long run we point back and say, that was a picture of the self-giving beauty that we all have now, and nobody needs to die anymore. We hope for that day. I can't wait for that day. Right? But today, who hopes for what they already have? And if we do have a life free of suffering and pain, and we have everything that we could ever have wanted, we better be sure we are where Christ has called us to be. Because people may be right outside, waiting for us to come to them with what we have. this morning we're going to partake in a picture of this as we serve communion to you. This meal that was Jesus' very body and blood given out for us. So as we prepare to do that, I'm going to ask those from Deeper Weekend that I've talked to, if you're in here, if you'll come help me serve, I'll serve them and I'll serve you. But the bread today was baked by our teenagers with the help of some very special people you'll meet in just a few minutes. But this bread and this cup reminds us that on the night Jesus was betrayed, he took the bread and he gave thanks and he broke it, saying, "This is my body, which is broken for you." And likewise, after dinner, he took the cup and he said, "This is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for you. And so often as you eat and as you drink this, you do this in remembrance of me." That is to say, every time we eat and we drink together, we remember that our life, our very life, comes from this life that was given out for us. Amen. And on whenever the front of our table says, "Do in remembrance of me," or "Do as I have done," it means that in some way, this bread becomes the body of Christ broken for other people. And the blood that gives us life becomes his blood shed out for the world. So, as we prepare to eat and drink, think on what suffering Christ would have you endure for the day in which it does not exist anymore.